On June 6, 1944, Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy in the largest amphibious invasion in history. 150,000 men crossed the English Channel. 11,000 aircraft filled the skies. 5,000 ships choked the sea. It was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. But the invasion's success depended on a deception so audacious, so intricate, that even today it seems almost impossible. Adolf Hitler had to believe that Normandy was a feint. He had to believe the real invasion would come elsewhere. He had to hold his best divisions in reserve, waiting for an attack that would never come. He believed it because one man made him believe it. A Spaniard with no military training, a failed businessman, a man who had been rejected by British intelligence 3 times before they finally listened to him. His name was Juan Pujol Garcia. The British called him Garbo after the actress because he was the greatest actor of them all. The Germans called him Alaric, and they trusted him completely. They gave him an Iron Cross for his service to the Reich, never knowing that every word he told them was a lie. This is the story of the double agent who fed Hitler fake D-Day plans for 3 years, the man who created an imaginary spy network of 27 agents, the man who told the Germans exactly what the Allies wanted them to hear and watched them believe every word. Juan Pujol was born in Barcelona in 1912 to a middle-class family. His father owned a dye factory. His childhood was comfortable, unremarkable, the kind of life that produces accountants and shopkeepers, not master spies. The Spanish Civil War changed everything. Pujol found himself caught between 2 extremes he despised equally. The communists on the Republican side executed his friends. The fascists on Franco's side destroyed his country. He came out of the war with a burning hatred for totalitarianism in all its forms. When World War II began, Pujol decided he had to do something. He couldn't fight with a gun, but perhaps he could fight with his mind. He would offer his services to British intelligence. He would become a spy. There was just one problem. The British didn't want him. Pujol approached the British embassy in Madrid 3 times between 1940 and 1941. Each time he was turned away. He had no connections, no training, nothing to offer except his enthusiasm. The British had more important things to worry about than a Spanish nobody who wanted to play spy. So Pujol did something extraordinary. He decided to become a German spy first, then offer himself to the British. He would bring them a prize they couldn't refuse, access to German intelligence from the inside. In January 1941, Pujol walked into the German embassy in Madrid and offered to spy for the Reich. Unlike the British, the Germans were interested. The Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence service, was always looking for agents who could operate in enemy territory. Pujol convinced the Germans that he could travel to Britain and establish a spy network there. They gave him money, invisible ink, and instructions for sending coded messages. They gave him the code name Alaric. They told him to report everything he could learn about British military dispositions. There was just one small detail the Germans didn't know. Pujol never went to Britain. He went to Lisbon instead. From a small apartment in neutral Portugal, Pujol began sending reports to his German handlers, reports about British troop movements, reports about convoys sailing from Liverpool, reports about military installations across England. All of it was completely invented. Pujol had never been to Britain. He didn't speak English. His entire knowledge of the country came from tourist guides, reference books, and Portuguese newspapers. He created his reports from scratch, inventing details that sounded plausible, mixing just enough truth with his fabrications to make them convincing. The Germans believed every word. They rated Alaric as one of their best sources in Britain. They paid him generously and demanded more reports. Pujol was running one of the most successful spy operations of the war. The only problem was that he was making it all up, and eventually the British would notice. British intelligence had broken the German codes. Through the ultra-intercepts, they could read what the Abwehr was telling Berlin about its agents in Britain, and the reports from Agent Alaric were causing serious concern. The British knew there was no German agent operating in Liverpool. They knew the convoys Alaric reported didn't exist. They knew the military installations he described were fictional. But the Germans clearly believed Alaric was real, and his reports were reaching the highest levels of the Nazi command. MI5 launched a frantic search for this phantom spy. Who was this man who seemed to know so much about Britain while getting so much wrong? Where was he operating from? How had he fooled the Germans so completely? The search took months. Eventually, through contacts in neutral countries, they traced the reports back to Lisbon. They found Pujol. When MI5 realized what Pujol had done, they were astonished. This amateur, this untrained civilian, had single-handedly created a fictional spy network that the Germans completely believed. He had fooled some of the best intelligence officers in Nazi Germany, using nothing but his imagination and a tourist guidebook. This time, when Pujol offered his services to the British, they said yes. In April 1942, Juan Pujol arrived in London to begin his new career as a double agent. MI5 assigned him a case officer named Tomas Harris, a brilliant art dealer with a Spanish mother who spoke the language fluently. Harris would become Pujol's partner in one of the most elaborate deceptions in military history. The British gave Pujol the code name Garbo, after Greta Garbo. Like the actress, he could play any role convincingly. Unlike the actress, his performances would save thousands of lives. The first order of business was to expand the spy network the Germans believed Garbo was running. When he arrived in London, Garbo had already invented 3 fictional subagents. Over the next 2 years, he would add 24 more. Each agent was a fully developed character with a background, personality, and area of expertise. There was a Portuguese businessman who traveled frequently and could report on shipping movements. There was a British officer who hated his government and was willing to sell secrets for money. There was a Venezuelan student studying in Glasgow who could report on Scottish military installations. None of them existed. They were all characters in a fiction that Garbo and Harris were writing together, a sprawling novel of espionage that the Germans read as fact. Garbo was part of a larger British operation known as the Double Cross system, run by a committee called the 20 Club, XX in Roman numerals, hence Double Cross. The 20 Club controlled every German agent operating in Britain. Every single one had been captured, turned, or was fictional from the start. The Germans thought they had an extensive intelligence network in Britain. They didn't have anything. Every report they received came through channels the British controlled. Every piece of information was crafted to serve Allied purposes. Garbo quickly became the most important agent in the double-cross system. The Germans trusted him completely. They never questioned his reports. They paid him thousands of pounds to support his imaginary network. They gave him an Iron Cross for his service to the fatherland. This trust was carefully cultivated. Garbo didn't just tell the Germans what they wanted to hear. He told them things that were true but useless, things that were true but arrived too late to matter, and things that were false but perfectly designed to shape their thinking. The art was in the mixture. Too much truth and Garbo would be giving away real secrets. Too little truth and the Germans would become suspicious. Harris and Pujol spent endless hours crafting messages that threaded this needle perfectly. Over 3 years, Garbo sent over 1,000 messages to his German handlers. Some were brief updates. Others were lengthy reports running to thousands of words. All were written in invisible ink or transmitted by radio in code. The messages described British military preparations in exhaustive detail. Troop movements, ship sailings, aircraft production, political developments. All of it was calculated to build a picture in German minds that served Allied strategy. Garbo's fictional agents provided the perfect cover for feeding false information. If the British wanted the Germans to believe that a certain unit was stationed in Scotland, one of Garbo's Scottish agents would report seeing it. If they wanted the Germans to believe that an invasion was being planned at a particular location, multiple agents would report preparations there. The network also allowed the British to explain away problems. If a report turned out to be wrong, Garbo could blame it on a careless sub-agent. He could fire agents whose reports had been inaccurate, which only increased German confidence in his quality control. By 1944, the Abwehr considered Agent Alaric their most valuable source in Britain. They had no idea that their most valuable source was writing fiction for the enemy. In early 1944, the Allies were planning the invasion of Europe. Everyone knew it was coming. Hitler knew it. The German generals knew it. The question was where and when. The obvious target was the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. The crossing would be shortest there. The beaches were suitable for landing. The ports were close. Every logical analysis pointed to Calais as the invasion site. The actual target was Normandy, 150 miles to the southwest. The beaches were more difficult. The supply situation would be harder. But Normandy was less heavily defended, and surprise was everything. To make the invasion succeed, the Germans had to believe that Normandy was a diversion. They had to think the real attack would come at Calais, even after Allied troops were already ashore in Normandy. They had to hold their reserves in place, waiting for an attack that would never come. This was Operation Fortitude, the greatest deception in military history, and Garbo was its centerpiece. The heart of Operation Fortitude was a phantom army called the 1st United States Army Group, or FUSAG. According to German intelligence, FUSAG was a massive force of over 1 million men, commanded by General George Patton, America's most aggressive commander. It was stationed in southeastern England, directly across the Channel from Calais. FUSAG didn't exist. There were no million men. There were no tank divisions. There were no landing craft massed in the southeastern ports. The whole thing was a fiction, supported by rubber tanks, wooden aircraft, and radio traffic that simulated the communications of a massive army. Garbo's job was to make FUSAG real in German minds. His network of fictional agents reported on FUSAG constantly. They described troop concentrations in Kent and Sussex. They reported on supply buildups in Dover. They identified unit insignia and command structures. They provided the human intelligence that confirmed what German aerial reconnaissance seemed to show. The Germans ate it up. Their intelligence assessments in the spring of 1944 showed FUSAG exactly where the Allies wanted them to see it. They believed Patton was poised to strike at Calais. They positioned their strongest reserves, including several Panzer divisions, to meet this phantom threat. The trap was set. All that remained was springing it. June 6, 1944. The invasion had begun. Allied forces were storming the beaches of Normandy. The Germans knew about it within hours. The question now was whether they would reinforce Normandy with everything they had, or hold back, waiting for the real invasion at Calais. Garbo's most important message was sent at 3 a.m. on June 9th, 3 days after the landings. It was timed to arrive too late to effect the initial invasion, but early enough to shape German response in the critical days that followed. The message was a masterpiece of deception. Garbo reported that his network had identified the Allied order of battle. They had confirmed that significant forces remained in southeastern England, including FUSAG under Patton. The Normandy landings were a diversion designed to draw German reserves away from Calais before the main assault. It is perfectly clear that the present attack is a large-scale operation, Garbo wrote, but diversionary in character, for the purpose of establishing a strong bridgehead in order to draw the maximum of our reserves to the area of operation and to retain them there so as to be able to strike a blow somewhere else with assured success. He concluded, the constant aerial bombardment which the area of the Pas de Calais has suffered and the strategic disposition of these forces give reason to suspect an attack in that region of France, which may also be accompanied by a landing in Norway. The message reached the highest levels of the German command. It was shown to Hitler himself, and Hitler believed it. The German response to Normandy was hamstrung from the start by the fear that it was a trap. On June 6th, Panzer divisions that could have reached the beaches within hours were held in reserve because commanders couldn't get permission to move them. Hitler was sleeping, and no one dared wake him. By the time he authorized their release, the Allies had established a foothold. But the real impact of Garbo's message came in the days after D-Day. German commanders wanted to throw everything they had at Normandy, to crush the beachhead before it could be reinforced. But the High Command, influenced by Garbo's reports, refused to strip the Calais defenses. The real invasion was still coming. FUSAG was still waiting to strike. For 7 crucial weeks after D-Day, the Germans kept their best Panzer divisions in the Calais area, waiting for Patton's Phantom Army. 19 divisions sat idle while the Allies built up their forces in Normandy. By the time the Germans finally accepted that Calais was not the target, it was far too late. Military historians estimate that Garbo's deception saved thousands of Allied lives. The divisions held at Calais could have turned the Normandy campaign into a bloodbath. Instead, they waited for an attack that existed only in the imagination of a Spanish double agent and his British handlers. In July 1944, the Germans awarded Juan Pujol the Iron Cross for his exceptional service to the Reich. The recommendation praised his intelligence network as the best source of information the Abwehr possessed in Britain. It cited his accurate predictions about the Allied invasion plans. 3 months later, King George VI awarded Pujol the Member of the Order of the British Empire, or NBE, for his service to the Allied cause. He's believed to be the only person in history to receive high decorations from both sides in the same war. The irony was exquisite. The Germans gave Pujol a medal for deceiving them. They never suspected that their most trusted agent was a fiction writer who had made fools of their entire intelligence apparatus. After the war ended, Juan Pujol disappeared. He had reason to fear that surviving Nazis might seek revenge if they discovered his role in the D-Day deception. He faked his own death, moved to Venezuela, and lived quietly under an assumed name for nearly 40 years. His story remained classified. The British government didn't acknowledge the double-cross system until the 1970s. Garbo's identity wasn't publicly revealed until 1984, when a researcher tracked him down in Venezuela. In 1944, 40 years after D-Day, Pujol was brought to London to meet the surviving members of his wartime team. He visited Buckingham Palace and met the Duke of Edinburgh. He walked the Normandy beaches where his deception had saved so many lives. "I wanted to fight against totalitarianism," Pujol said in one of his few interviews. "I had seen what fascism did to Spain. I had seen what the communists did. I knew I couldn't fight with weapons, but I could fight with my mind. I could use lies to serve the truth." Juan Pujol Garcia died in 1988, 4 years after his story finally became public. He had lived long enough to be recognized as one of the most important secret agents of World War II. The man who invented a spy network out of nothing. The man who fed Hitler fake D-Day plans for 3 years. The man who helped save the world through the power of imagination. The story of Juan Pujol is the story of how one determined individual can change history. He had no training. He had no resources. He had no backing. All he had was hatred for tyranny and the audacity to act on it. He offered himself to the British 3 times and was rejected, so he became a German spy first, running a fictional network from Lisbon, using nothing but a tourist guidebook and his imagination. When the British finally realized what he had done, they recruited him not because he asked, but because he had made himself indispensable. For 3 years, Garbo fed the Germans exactly what the Allies wanted them to believe. His fictional agents reported on a fictional army preparing for a fictional invasion, and the Germans believed every word because Garbo made them believe. On D-Day, that belief cost the Germans everything. The divisions held at Calais, the reinforcements that never came, the counterattack that was never launched. All because one man had spent 3 years building a fiction so elaborate, so detailed, so convincing that it was stronger than the truth. Juan Pujol Garcia didn't fire a weapon in World War II. He fired something more powerful. He fired lies in service of the truth, and those lies helped win the war.